All right, so now the meeting is getting recorded. So welcome everyone to our Q2 grantee meeting for Preschool Promise grantees. So just go ahead and put on the chat, like, your name and the name of your program. Next slide. We like to go ahead and remind all of our grantees just of our mission, vision, and values. So this is a slide that you're going to go ahead and see in all of our Preschool Promise presentations. So it's always a good reminder for you to go ahead and get grounded and go back and read all of that wonderful information that we have. During this presentation, another reminder is please go ahead and remain muted. And then if you have any questions, just go ahead and put it on the chat. We have several Dell staff monitoring the chat. So we just ask that you stay muted. And if you have any questions, just go ahead and put them on the chat. Next slide. Alrighty, so for our agenda today, we're going to go over some program updates and reminders. We also have some payment information and some AMS information from our grants team. We're going to talk about enrollment. We're going to go over some of the data and then some expectations with our Preschool Promise grant. We're also going to go ahead and give you a quick little update there on our class and ECHRS observations as well. And then during this time, we have Bolly, who's joining us today. We have Jeffrey, who's going to be going over just some things that Preschool Promise grantees should go ahead and keep in mind as you hire staff and, as as an employer across the state. Over the past year, we've received questions here about, like, do I have to pay overtime? Like, how many hours a month should they get paid time off? And some of those questions, we are limited in that information, but we do have Bully, who has a wealth of resources for employers like yourself. So we figured it was a good idea to go ahead and bring them and then have them go over some best practices and some reminders for you all. And then we'll go ahead and close. So as you can see, we have a full agenda. Any questions, go ahead and put them on the chat, and then we'll continue. Okay, next slide. Quick reminder for you all as Preschool Promise grantees, you do have some local supports. You have your CCRNR that's there to go ahead and help you, as well as our early learning hubs. One thing to go ahead and keep in mind is our local supports, they're not trained on any type of like grant administration for your grant. Just remember that any of those questions that will be asked, that you will reach out to us either by phone or by email. So just kind of a gentle reminder, we put in some information there about the assistance that you can find at the CCRNR. But as far as like payments, reporting, waivers, your grant requirements, that will be a connection that you'll need to make with Dell. Just because they're a local support that's tasked with supporting you in like different parts of the implementation. So good information there. Next slide. Alrighty, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Lauren Sigmund for some quick reminders. Go ahead, Lauren.
Thanks, Dana. Hi, all. I'm Lauren Sigmund. I'm a preschool specialist here at DELC, and I think I've emailed or spoke to most of you. Primarily, I'm helping support K-12 and other exempt providers that are receiving Preschool Promise, but I'm here to help right now with all Preschool Promise stuff. So we'll get into some updates and reminders based on some questions we've been receiving and just upcoming things. So Mel, we can go to the next one. So the first reminder and little resource for you all is our new and improved and updated and fancy report checklist. This can be found on our Preschool Promise dashboard, and it outlines all of the reports that are due, when they're due, and it also has a link to them. So you can kind of help keep track at your program of what's coming up and what needs to get turned in. All our monthly reports, just a reminder, are due the 15th of the following month, and then you'll get a report summary the 16th, just giving you an update of anything that may be missing or confirming what's completed. We do encourage everyone, when you're doing those reports, to click that last little box that says, send me a copy of my response. That way, if there are any errors in technology or if anything comes up, you have a copy that it was submitted. It makes it a lot easier to track that it was complete, and we can kind of fix things on our end. And also just a reminder that those reports are due by the date listed, and any reports that are missing will prevent you from being able to draw down your preschool promise funds. So we encourage you to get them in as timely as you can. We do understand that things do come up, like we just had a bunch of weather that impacted a lot of programs. So just keep us in the loop. You can email us at Preschool Promise inbox if you do need an extension for any reason on those reports. So we're happy to help facilitate that when needed. Coming up here next will be our Q3 equity plan and expulsion and suspension, and more information will be coming around about the equity plan and a gov delivery. I know we've been receiving some questions on what that will look like, so we'll be sending that out soon in our next gov delivery bulletin. And then as we prepare for next year, a new site information report will be coming out too in June. But once again, this checklist, as well as all the links for all the reports and the most up-to-date information, as well as like this recording and slides from today, will all be on that Preschool Promise Grantee dashboard. You can go to the next one. So winter closures, as I mentioned, we all went through some ice and snow and lots of different stuff a couple weeks back. So we just wanted to send a reminder. The requirement for Preschool Promise is meeting that 900 instructional hours. And if you were needing to close due to those weather-related closures, and it's preventing you from meeting that 900 hours, so because of closing 2 or 3 days, it means that you were not able to meet 900 hours, then the expectation is that you're adding days back into your program calendar to be able to meet that requirement. So there's a few options listed on how that can be done. It's up to your program to determine how you want to meet those. So things like adding days that weren't previously scheduled. So like at the end of your calendar year, or if you're a Monday through Thursday program, you could add a Friday back in. Or you could extend your time. So if you're a 6-hour program, you could add, an hour to be able to meet that 900-hour requirement as well. If you're in a situation based on, using a facility that's rented space or contract or union issues that prevent you from kind of being able to add those hours back in at your own discretion, then we'd need you to submit a waiver, and we'd go through a waiver process to review not being able to meet that instructional hour requirement. Another option would be if you had previously planned in-service or professional development days or other closure days that aren't holidays, you could add a day back to those times as well. We do know that the State Board of Education is going to make a decision around doing some possible exemptions for instructional hours based on the weather, and that decision will be made next week, I believe. So we do understand that K-12 may be in that situation where it's kind of outside of their control about being able to make up all the time they need to. So again, that would just be a waiver process. The link to the waiver report is on our Preschool Promise dashboard as well. And if you have questions or need help or support in thinking about how to add days back, you can always email us at the Preschool Promise email as well. Okay, the next slide. So just another reminder, anytime that your program has an update or a change to your site, your address, a business name, your licensing number, or owner change, we need to receive that information so that we can make sure that we have the most up-to-date contact information for you all, and that our partners do as well. So anytime any of those changes come up, we ask that you submit a grantee update and change form. You're going to find that on the dashboard as well. And that form goes to update all of our systems. So like when your quality improvement specialist wants to get a hold of you, they are aware that there's, a new address or a new location or a new person that they can talk to. So if we don't get that form, and it's hard for us to update all of the systems across where we store that data. So just anytime there's a new change in your facility, submitting that form really helps us track things across so that no communication gets delayed in responding to you. Okay. Next slide.
I had a question regarding hours. Is days would be counted as well, or just we should be more concentrated on hours?
Just the hours, the 900 instructional hours. For the days requirement, there's a grant requirement for 265 days calendar year. Now that we're in the year, you mean that's set from your start and end date of your calendar. So that shouldn't change based on, you know, you already started and you'll end again. So if anything, it would just extend those that consecutive days. And then the other day requirement would just be around not having a closure for more than 21 days, which if the snow, you know, if for some reason you happen to be closed during the weather that created a 21-day or longer closure, you could send that in a waiver as well. But I don't think, because of the timing of it, I don't think we had any programs that had to extend the closure. So it's really, yeah, just the hours. And I see there's some questions in the chat. We'll do our best to respond to those and follow up on our Gov delivery after the meeting, but I'm going to pass it over to our grants team to go over some other updates.
Hi, good afternoon. This is Anthony Martirano, grants manager with Preschool Promise, and my colleague Mary Fleming as well. So this sheet or this screen, very simple, and we want to just keep it very direct to the point, because obviously it's important for all of you to receive your funds and to receive those funds in a timely manner. We're still seeing a number of grantees only submitting either a draw report or a claim within AMS. It's critically important to understand that both steps in the process are required in order to have your funds reviewed and ultimately processed. So again, you're needing to submit your draw report and then submitting the corresponding claim within AMS in order to have those funds reviewed and ultimately processed for payments. The other piece that I want to really draw everyone's attention to is right under on the screen, right under number 2, AMS claim. It's really important to understand that there is a difference. We've shared this information previously, but again, just as a reminder, you have to actually submit your claim in AMS as opposed to saving the claim. So when you're in AMS and you're looking at your task list, if you see an entry that says claim in progress, that means you started the claim, but you have not actually submitted it to us here at DELC. The difference being, if you see, once you have submitted it, you'll see that status changing. It'll show claim review in progress. That means it is sitting in DELC's queue in our system to compare your claim in AMS to your submitted draw report. So again, if you're seeing the status as claim in progress, you haven't submitted it to us. I or Meredith, we don't see it. So there's nothing that we can do with it at that point. Once you go in and you click submit, that's step number 18 in the instructions on how to start and submit a claim. Once you've done that, again, the status will change to claim review in progress. And then we're able to do that. The other piece that's important to think about is that AMS will only allow you to submit one claim at a time, right? So if you submitted a draw report for December, one for January, and one for February, you can only submit the claim for December. Once that has been submitted, reviewed, and approved, you'd then be able to then submit your claim for the next month, January. Same thing. Once it's been reviewed and approved, then you'll have the ability to then submit for February. If you are submitting for a previous quarter, for example, if you're looking for October, November, and December, and you submitted your draw report for those 3 months, October, November, December, when you go into AMS, you want to make sure that you're entering the appropriate date in the period covered section, right? So that would be October 1st of 2023 through December 31st, 2023. So those dates that you have listed in your period covered in AMS must match the corresponding draw report, just like the dollar amounts. You can't submit $5,000 draw report and ask for $18,000 in AMS. They must match. It's got to be a one-to-one correlation there. We're also getting to the place where our folks are looking at, their bigger projects or their bigger purchases, equipment, different items of that nature. So again, as a reminder, we include the link here on the slide deck that'll go out, but it is also on the Preschool Promise dashboard. It's the request for prior approval. You've got to request for pre-approval for any kind of project or equipment that has an accumulative valuation of $5,000 or more, right? So not how you invoice it, like meaning I'm only going to charge $3,000 this month and $3,000 next month. If it is connected, or if that is the same project, you must submit that as one request for approval. That way we're able to understand the full scope of what's happening and to ensure that the Preschool Promise dollars are being spent appropriately. Again, 2 other reminders on here. We have the AMS dashboard. We've got a very, very strong team that's working to continuously improve and create resources to assist you in your process there. So I draw your attention there. So anything and everything that's related to the awards management system, AMS, is located there, as well as, again, a plug for the Preschool Promise dashboard. Anything and everything that you might want to know is located there on the Preschool Promise dashboard. And when in doubt, as Lauren mentioned previously, email us at the Preschool Promise inbox. We've got a number of our team members that are triaging that inbox throughout the day to ensure that we're giving you all the best and quickest responses. Next slide.
Alrighty, thank you, Anthony. Alrighty, well, I'm seeing a lot of questions on the chat box and then also on the Q&A box too. So we'll go ahead and, Dell staff are working to go ahead and address some of those. And then we'll also go ahead and send a summary of all of the questions that were asked to make sure that you have everything you need. Just based on what I'm noticing on the chat message there box is that, remember, your Preschool Promise Grantee dashboard. That's where you're going to go ahead and see all of the resources there. So just make sure that you go ahead and put that as a favorite on your browser. And then once again, we'll go ahead and send like all of the meeting materials tomorrow by the Gov delivery as well. Alrighty, let's go ahead and shift gears to enrollment. Statewide, we're doing pretty good. As of January the 19th, we're at 94% enrollment, which is awesome, which is great. Thank you to our hubs and to all of you for getting kiddos enrolled in place in Preschool Promise sites. Last I checked, there was about 180 sites, a 100% enrollment, which is phenomenal to go ahead and I see that type of enrollment. But as you all can see, we're still not hitting the 100% across the state, right? So there's still some sites that are not at the 100% enrollment. So we're going to go ahead and transition. Well, if we can go to the next slide. So just some general reminders about enrollment. Your Preschool Promise grant requires you to be a 100% enrollment for your grant. So just a gentle reminder for all of us there. And then you're required to go ahead and connect with the hub within 3 business days. If for some reason a child ends up leaving your program, so then we can get another family into the program as well. And then, super important to you for you to go ahead and collaborate with the hub and go ahead and like get your slots filled, and also to collaborate on some strategies on how to get numbers, the number of children into the program increase. Now, one thing that I wanted to go ahead and make note is that we did make this at a glance document last program year to kind of like really try to figure out like what is the role of the hub, what is the role of the grantee, and it really is a nice document. You know, overall in summary, in recruitment and enrollment is a collaborative effort by the grantee and the hub, right? You're supposed to be collaborating with the hub's supposed to be collaborating with you. You know, we also wanted to go ahead and clarify, like, there is a role for grantees to be doing some outreach there and letting families know that they are a preschool promise grantee. It's also, you know, great practice to have a good brand in community so people know that you're a preschool promise grantee. So just a reminder for all of you to go ahead and check that at a glance document, which talks about like what is the role of the hub and the grantee when we're talking about family recruitment and responsibilities. Next slide. So as I mentioned, we still have sites that are not at the 100% enrollment. So we are going to start monitoring some of the, you know, we have started like the monitoring of all of you and all of the reports that you submitted. So we're going to go ahead and start transitioning into a lot of support for those grantees that are not fully enrolled. So what does that mean, right? So that means that if you are a grantee who has a site that is not averaging 80% or higher when we're looking at the months, you know, between of October and December, or you do not have 100% enrollment by December of 2023, you're going to be asked to go ahead and complete a corrective action plan, informing DELG on how are you going to achieve 100% enrollment by April. So just kind of go ahead and take a pause there. So what does that mean? Is that you're going to go ahead and get a notice from DELG. If you are not averaging the 80% within those 3 months, or you haven't met like 100, you don't have 100% like in December, you will be put on a corrective action plan, just requiring you to go ahead and work with your hub on a plan on how are we going to achieve, you know, 100% enrollment there. Failure to go ahead and meet 100% enrollment by April may result in the inability to go ahead and continue with the full slot award amount. So it's super important that you connect with your hub. Notices will be sent by February the 16th. So you'll get a notice and you'll know. What happens if we send the notice, it's already January and you're like a 100%? That's great news. Then you're, you know, you would have fulfilled your corrective action plan. So let's go to the next slide, where I'm going to go ahead and go over some just quick Q&A. One thing to go ahead and note, we're not going to be taking like questions right now, but put them on your chat. And if we have time at the end, we're going to come back and address some of these questions. But we've compiled this quick FAQ to address some of these questions that you may have. So when and how will grantees be notified of their site status? We're going to start notifying, and everybody should get notified by February the 16th. You'll go ahead and get an email that says, hey, grantee, per our records, this site is at 50% enrollment for this month. And then it'll go ahead and give you some next steps there. What will happen if my site meets 100% enrollment in January or before April? That's great. Like, then you will have fulfilled your requirement to be a 100%, and then you'll go ahead and get another notice from DELG that says, congratulations, you made your 100% enrollment. You are no longer in a corrective action plan. Will DELG provide a low enrollment corrective action plan template? Absolutely. In that notification, we're going to go ahead and send you a template that you can use. This will also have like a section for you to fill out and for your hub to fill out, because the goal is that you collaborative are coming together and saying, how are we going to meet that 100% enrollment? Who is responsible for completing the low enrollment corrective action plan? I just mentioned that it's both the hub and the grantee are responsible for completing that plan and getting that submitted to us. And then when is that the corrective action plan template due? It's going to be due back to us by March the 8th. And I really just want to go ahead and emphasize the goal of this plan is for you to go ahead and come up with a plan along with your hub on how can we get that enrollment up, right? How can we achieve the 100% enrollment by April? Some questions that I foresee there's going to be a lot of questions on this topic. Make sure you put those on the chat box so we can expand our FAQ. And like I said, the goal is for you all to go ahead and work collaborative. We're still not hitting the 100% enrollment across the state across all of our sites. One question that I forgot to add here is like, what happens if you're like a multi-site type of grantee and 2 of your sites are 100%, the other site is like a 10%, what should you do? You're still going to be putting a corrective action plan for that site, but maybe that other site that's a 100%, you're actually getting like a wait list, right? There's families waiting for that. You are able to go ahead and request a site change through the update and change form, always with collaboration with your hub, like talking to your hub and saying, hey, what are you hearing from families? Are they, what's the interest? What's going on? What is it that I can do to be able to meet the needs of families? So this is just kind of our plan for enrollment. And like I said, we're going to be reviewing that enrollment in April, which if we remember, the April monthly report is not going to be due until May the 15th, right? So then we are going to start analyzing the data and see how you all are doing. We're going to be obviously paying very close attention in the coming months, especially as, grantees go through the process. And then maybe you made enrollment in January or February or March, which is great. Then you will have fulfilled your corrective action plan. If you need any assistance, if you want to go ahead and like brainstorm, or we're here to go ahead and help. So feel free to reach out. I do want to go ahead and say that when we look at our data, like our initial, data that we've collected, out of our 226 grantees that we have across the state, is probably around 60 grantees that will be working through getting their enrollment, maybe less because this is very preliminary data. As far as like, when will you be notified? I think, in working with your hubs and also looking at your data, you will know if you're going to be put on a corrective action plan, right? Because you have enrollment numbers and you have that available to you. So if you met enrollment in December and January, none of this applies to you because if you achieve 100%, then you're good to go, right? But then if you did not average, if one of your sites did not average, the 80% or higher between October and December. So our goal is to go ahead and get all of this information out to you tomorrow. And I'll go ahead and keep an eye here on the chat if maybe I can address some of those questions too there at the end once we're done. I'm going to, transition to take it. Sorry, we're getting a lot of messages here. We're going to go ahead and have Jeff, go through his presentation, which is really great information that we have here available for you all. So Jeff, go ahead. And next slide. Oh, no, my apologies. It's not Jeff yet. We're going to go to Michael, who's going to give us an update on that class and Ecker's observations. So Michael, go ahead.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Michael Connor. I work with the Department of Early Learning and Care. I help coordinate technical assistance, training, and coaching for preschool programs, early learning programs that we fund here at DELC. So that includes Preschool Promise, Oregon Prenatal to Kindergarten Head Start, Baby Promise. Happy to talk with you a little bit today about our ongoing effort with colleagues at Western Oregon University, Go Wolves, to provide classroom observations in Preschool Promise classrooms, sites, as well as Oregon prenatal to kindergarten sites. The main thing I want to highlight is that this effort, some of you have already had observations, some of you maybe have an observation coming up, some of you haven't been notified yet about an observation, all that's fine. The main thing I want to highlight is the value of continuous improvement here at DELC, and with partnership with you, we embrace the idea that we build on strengths, we tackle challenges, we look at data, we look at input from different people, and we want to make things even better. We want to make sure that participating children and families have great experiences in your programs. And so structured observations about how children and teachers are working together in classrooms is a cool source of data about quality and can be used for planning, for coaching, and like that. Next slide, please. Speaking of data, just a little bit about the story of this project. So in the fall of 2023, there were new classroom observers who got trained and hired at Western Oregon University. They conducted about 111 observations in the fall. You can see the different tools that they use. You as the program leader have the option about which tool works best for you. Your quality specialist, the Preschool Promise quality specialist, is prepared to talk with you as you're thinking about what tools you might want to use. They can help you make a decision. In this winter, we've got teams of reliable observers throughout the state. Our target is around 180 observations. There's always, snow and sleet and rain that gets in the way, but they're trying to get those scheduled as much as they can. Next slide. Some of you have already had an observation, and that's great. TRI at Western Oregon University, the Research Institute at Western Oregon University, will provide you with a report about the observation. They'll tell you what they saw, they'll highlight some strengths, maybe identify some challenges, provide some resources. What a great piece of information for you to review with your team, with your quality specialist, with your coach. If you've not had an observation yet, that's okay. Stay tuned. We're not in a hurry. They're going to let you know when it's your turn. There are also tools that can help you without an outside observer coming in. Your quality specialist can consult with you about some of those tools, more informal observation tools, tallies, checklists. Your coaches will use focused observations as part of coaching cycles, so you can still have good data about what's going on in your classrooms to be used for continuous quality improvement. Next slide. That's what I wanted to say. I'm excited to hear more about how those observations are going. I get to meet with the Preschool Promise quality specialists every month, and they tell me all the cool things that are going on with your program. So more later, but thanks for your attention on that. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Michael. Now we're going to turn it over to Bolly to do their presentation. Go ahead, Jeffrey.
Thank you, Dana. Good to be with you. Good afternoon, everybody. It's a pleasure to spend some time this afternoon with folks who are dedicated to working with children and families to improve their situations in Oregon. So I appreciate the good work that you do. And keep in mind that this is just kind of a broad overview. I'm going to talk about some hot topics in wage and hour law. I know that you're primarily focused on providing a great educational environment for children and running a business, but it's important not to lose sight of the requirements of employment law in doing so. And so hopefully after today's presentation, you'll feel as though you've got a friend at the Bureau of Labor and Industries, someone that you can reach out to. It's a safe space where your questions, your inquiries are not going to trigger an investigation if you come talk to us. We just want to provide you with good information. So it's important to get this stuff right. That way everybody in Oregon that's doing this work is on a level playing field. So if we could go to the next slide, please. it was kind of tough to pare this down to a list of 5 things. Maybe there's 5A and 5B here, but let's go ahead and go to the next slide and we'll kind of zip through. And you can reach out to our group, the Employer Assistance Program at BOLI. There are 7 of us. You can send us an email while you're waiting for a response back, and almost always we're able to get back to folks within 24 hours or the next business day at least. You can also reach out to me directly and I'd be happy to talk with you. And if you feel a little bit of anxiety about reaching out to a government agency to get information, you can always ask a hypothetical question. You can phone for a friend. We just don't want there to be a chilling effect between you and good information. And so while we stress that this is a safe place where you can come, we understand that folks are a little bit nervous about that. And we just want to assure you that your questions and inquiries to BOLI Employer Assistance are not going to initiate an investigation. Okay, next slide, please. So some of the enforcement priorities of our wage and hour division have been in the proper classification of workers. So we're just going to touch on these things lightly. Minimum wage and overtime, rest and meal periods are super challenging, particularly in the preschool and childcare context, and knowing what is and what is not compensable work time. Finally, when are the final paychecks due, and what is a permissible payroll deduction, I think is useful information. And there are fact sheets on each of these subject matter areas on our website, and I'll have links to those at the end of the presentation. Next, please. So the default position should always be that if you have someone working for you on your premises or wherever work is done, many of us are working remotely these days, whenever and wherever the work is done, the default position should be to classify those folks as employees. There are special rules for employing children in Oregon, and some hoops to jump through there. There are also narrow exceptions to the classification of workers as employees, but only in certain settings. So we're going to talk about volunteers real briefly, bona fide internship programs where you have unpaid interns, and independent contractors. Next slide, please. So as I say, classifying folks as employees is the safest option unless you really squarely fit within the classification. Know that if you hire anybody to do work who's under the age of 18, before they start work, you have to get an annual employment certificate to hire minors. You can go on our child labor page on our website. There is no fee for getting the annual employment certificate. If you wait until about May, when folks are staffing up for the summer, that's their busiest time of the year. But right now, child labor applications are being reviewed and usually granted unless you identify some hazardous work that's not allowed for minors or prohibited hours. There are greater restrictions on 14 and 15-year-olds than there are on 16 and 17-year-olds. We'll talk about rest and meal periods for adults, but children that are working for you get 15-minute rest breaks instead of 10-minute rest breaks. And you have to have that employment certificate in hand and verify the ages of minors working for you before you put them to work. And most organizations in Oregon cannot have volunteers. Those are only for public, religious, humanitarian, charitable type organizations. So if you have a nonprofit type entity that can have volunteers, and if you are a permissible entity for having volunteers, there are extra requirements for your employees to also volunteer for the organization. So the criteria for volunteers in general is that they be working for one of these types of organizations, that their work is truly on their own initiative, it is voluntary, and that there is no expectation of compensation and no compensation for the work. And there are narrow exceptions for the de minimis amount, like a t-shirt or a water bottle if somebody volunteers for, say, a race for the cure or something like that. And for stipends that would reimburse a volunteer or an unpaid intern actually for actual expenses incurred. If you have an employee, that also wants to volunteer, there are 2 additional criteria. One is that their volunteer duties be different from their paid duties. The second is that their volunteer work be outside of normal work hours, just to make a real bright line distinction between their paid work and their volunteer work. For interns, there are 7 criteria, and they are very strict. There's a new test under federal law that's been adopted in the last couple of years. And for unpaid internship programs, you have to meet all those criteria. We have a fact sheet on that on our website, but it has to correspond with integrated coursework and correspond to an academic schedule. You can't have unpaid interns displace paid workers. There's no guarantee of a job at the end of the internship, and so on. For independent contractors, our wage and hour division looks at an economic realities test that should show on balance that there's a high degree of economic independence on the part of an independent contractor. And when in doubt, classifying those workers as employees is the safest approach. Because if you misclassify a worker as an independent contractor and they're really an employee, lots of bad things can happen. There can be unpaid overtime. If the contract amount doesn't pay at least minimum wage, that can get our wage and hour investigators excited. If somebody gets hurt on the job and there's no workers' comp coverage, that can be catastrophic to your business. The Department of Revenue, the Employment Department, workers' comp, all may be interested in knowing why you are classifying the employee as an independent contractor. So you really want to get this right. Those 6 criteria under the economic realities test include the degree of control. So the more control exercise, like when is the start time, when is the stop time, exactly how is the work to be done, as opposed to contracting for a result, is one factor, degree of control. The second is the relative investments in the work. So folks are coming into your facility, your classroom, using your desks and your chairs, your computer systems, your chalkboards, then they're not really investing in the work. Typically, an independent contractor, like say a tow truck operator, is investing in the work by buying the tow truck, right? And the third is the opportunity for profit and loss. If you're paying a straight hourly wage, it doesn't look like an independent contractor relationship. And you don't need to meet all 6 of these factors, but if it's 3 to 3, that's a really close call, and you should probably err on the safe side and classify these folks as employees. The fourth is the skill and initiative required to do the job. And fifth is the permanency of the relationship. And then 6, which is a new one, is the work integral to the operations of the alleged employer? So if we hired somebody in our preschool to teach preschool, that's obviously integral to our operations. Whereas if we had a hard freeze and our plumbing springs a leak, we have a pipe that has burst, then we call a plumber. Well, the plumbing work is kind of incidental to and not integral to the operations of the alleged employer. So those are the 6 factors of the economic realities test. Next slide, please. Next, you're probably aware there's a minimum wage in Oregon, and that is a fairly unique system in Oregon that's got 3 separate tiers depending upon where the work is done. The current minimum wage rates are here on this slide, and they will be in effect until the end of June. So on and after July 1st, work will be subject to a newer and presumably higher minimum wage rate. We won't know what the minimum wage rates are for July 1st through June 30th in the coming year. Until about April, our labor commissioner will announce that based on the consumer price index for the US city average. Next slide, please. And really it depends on where the work is done. So some employers have a mobile workforce. I suspect that most of you do not. At least 50% of the work in a pay period, not a work week, but a pay period. When we get to overtime, we'll talk about the work week. If at least more than 50% of the work is done in the employer's fixed business location, that determines the minimum wage rate. There are some exemptions in certain industries from minimum wage. Those are not identical under state and federal law, but the federal minimum wage is much lower. So if there is an exemption from the state minimum wage, and you can reach out to me or any of my colleagues and we can talk about what those exemptions are. Then you may be relieved of the obligation to pay the higher state minimum wage, but you may not have a corresponding federal exemption that would allow you to pay that. So there's some additional information if you have folks working in more than one zone in the state in a pay period. I suspect that that's not going to affect most of you, so we can go ahead and skip to the next slide. So for most jobs, just as they require the payment of minimum wage for all hours worked, they require the payment of overtime for hours worked over 40 in a work week at 1.5 times the regular rate of pay. So there's a lot going on in that sentence. Sorry, I speak quickly for those who are translating this information. I'll try to slow down a little bit. But there's a reason why regular rate of pay and work week are in quotations here. Those are terms of art. So the regular rate of pay has to be at least minimum wage and is all remuneration, all compensation for the employee that they receive. And that may vary from work week to work week. Some employees are paid on the piece. Most employees are paid by the hour. Some are paid on a salary basis. But generally, even salaried employees are entitled to overtime. I'm a salaried employee, but I'm entitled to overtime for hours worked over 40 in a work week. I ask employers all the time, what is your work week? And they say Monday through Friday. Nope, that's a work schedule. A work week is 7 consecutive 24-hour periods. My work week starts at 12:01 a.m. on Monday and it goes through midnight on Sunday. So there are some things that we can exclude from the regular rate of pay, like benefits, like insurance premiums, like retirement benefits, gifts, discretionary bonuses. But if we have commissions or non-discretionary bonuses, those are included in the regular rate of pay, and all compensation for the work, whether it is a salary, an hourly rate of pay, a job rate, or a day rate. So there are some, as I say, some industry-specific exemptions from minimum wage only, or from minimum wage and overtime both, under state or federal law or both. And it's important to remember that not all salaried employees are exempt from overtime. Next slide, please. A really challenging thing, particularly in your work environment, is to manage employees and make sure that they get all of their rest and meal periods. But this has become an area of enforcement emphasis for our wage and hour division. So we want to get this right, and it is challenging. And so a couple of tips on rest and meal periods. One is the burden is on the employer to show that employees got their rest and meal periods as required by law. Those salaried exempt employees are not entitled to rest breaks except for rest breaks for the expression of breast milk. Yet everybody else, all salaried non-exempt employees and all hourly employees, get their rest breaks. And as I said, it's 15 minutes for every 4 hours worked for minors, 10 minutes for every 4 hours worked, or the major portion of 4 hours for adult workers. What's the major portion of 4 hours? We consider that to be 2 hours and 1 minute. So in a typical day, if somebody comes in at 8 and they work until 5 o'clock, maybe they get an hour for lunch. The lunch meal period only has to be 30 minutes, but often employers are more generous and give an hour for lunch or a meal period if it's a night shift. So if somebody comes in at 8 in the morning and they work till noon when they take lunch, at about 10 a.m. they ought to have a paid rest break. And then they go to a meal period. Shifts of 6 hours or longer, you have to have a meal period. They come back, let's say at 1 o'clock and work until 5. At about 3 o'clock in the afternoon, approximately in the middle of that work segment, as the nature of the work allows, the employer is required to give a paid rest break again in the afternoon. So in a typical shift of 8 hours, there are going to be 2 rest breaks and 1 meal period. There is only one exception to the rest break requirement, and is not going to apply to most of you. It is only for an employee that is working alone in a shift of 5 or fewer hours in a retail or service establishment. I'm not sure that preschool would be considered a service establishment, probably not. And I suspect that your employees are not working alone, so that exception would not apply. There is an exception to the rest and meal periods requirement for union contracts or CBAs, collective bargaining agreements, that have a provision that modifies the rest and meal period requirements of the law. Next slide, please. For meal periods, if the shift is less than 6 hours in length, there is not a requirement to have a meal period. But if it is 6 hours or longer, then there must be a meal period. And it has to be 30 minutes or more in duration. And just like the rest break, the employee has to be relieved of all duty during the rest or meal period. If it's interrupted and they're required to do some work, then technically they're supposed to start their rest or meal period over. So the burden is on the employer to establish that they're providing rest and meal periods that are required by law. How are you going to meet that requirement? One, it's good to have a written policy. We've got a handbook on writing policies. We've also got classes on policy writing guidelines. But having a handbook or a written policy that requires employees to take their rest and meal periods is a good first step. Giving employees the opportunity to read on paid work time their handbook. And then if the employee is skipping their breaks or trying to stack their breaks, that's not allowed. We need to talk to that employee and, if necessary, discipline the employee. Usually a conversation will do, but we want to record those as quickly as possible. I'm told we're almost out of time and we may need to wrap up. So there's a lot of information here. I only got through 3 out of the 5. Final paychecks is super important. So I'm being urged to go to the last slide where we have some. So here's, yes, let's, if you have a chance to look these over and you have any questions about them, please reach out to me and we will go over those in much more detail. And one more slide, I think. Yes. So we have fact sheets on all of these topics on our website. We have lots of resources for employers, free downloads of the commonly required workplace postings, handbooks for purchase. There's one on wage and hour law. There's one on leave laws. There was a question that was tossed around in the introductory conversation that we had today before the meeting started on sick time. So it's important to know that employers, all employers, regardless of the number of employees, have to provide up to 40 hours of sick time per year for the employee at the rate of 1 hour for every 30 hours worked. We have a fact sheet on Oregon sick time. If you have a small organization and you have 9 or fewer employees, it's not paid sick time. Unless you have an establishment in Portland, in which case it's 5 employees or less, it's unpaid but protected sick time. If you have 6 or more employees with an establishment in Portland, or 10 or more employees, and you don't have an establishment in Oregon, but you have in Portland rather, but you have employees in Oregon, then it is paid sick time if you're over those thresholds. And then we have classes. So generally our wage and hour class is 4 hours in length. We do 2 4-hour presentations on leave laws, one on leave laws basics, one on advanced leave laws, supervisory practices, documentation, discipline, and discharge. But short of that, a lot of small organizations don't have a dedicated human resources department. That's where we can really be of service. Most of the services that we offer are free. You can call us, you can email us. I hope to hear from you. And I hope this overview of our goods and services has been helpful. Don't be a stranger. And remember that your call to us will not trigger an investigation or enforcement action, but you can always phone for a friend or ask us a hypothetical. Thank you for allowing me the opportunity to be with you this afternoon. Good luck going forward and be careful out there. So my direct contact information, it may be on the next slide. There it is. So that's our general number. I'm going to go ahead and put into the chat my direct contact information. I thought it was on a slide, but maybe it was not. So it's Jeff Burgess. 971-673. I'm sorry, 612. It changed 0504. And I'll put my email address in the chat as well. I hope to hear from you, and I hope you all have a great rest of your day.
Thank you, Jeff. We really appreciate that presentation. We hope that you all find it useful. You will have access to his entire presentation and all of the slide decks once again. And then this is really what we wanted to do, right? Like get you all connected to him, and then that way you're able to go ahead and go directly to Bully and ask those questions, so you can continue with your implementation there. Next slide. Okay, so just some general reminders. We are here to go ahead and support you and help you with your preschool promise implementation and meeting your grant requirements. Once again, don't forget the preschool promise dashboard. That's where you're going to go ahead and find all of the links that require reports, resources, and manuals. We do send our Gov Delivery Bulletin 2 to 3 times a month. So that's another way for you to go ahead and stay connected. And then in your preschool promise dashboard, we do have a quick message box where you can go ahead and where we are actually connecting with you on a weekly basis, and we put reminders about your report is due, or don't forget the meeting. So just keep an eye on that. They come out on Monday or Tuesday. So that's another way for us to go ahead and get information to you all about any important thing happening with the program. We do have also our preschool promise email. Lauren has been doing an amazing job. Our goal is to reply to you within 24 to 48 hours. So that's our response time there. So if you have a question, just go ahead and send us an email. We do have a message box that you can call as well. Right now, we only have it available to just go ahead and get some, messages there, but we do call back, but email is also another way. We also do have one-on-one technical assistance. So if you need to go ahead and schedule a meeting, just send us an email. We'll go ahead and schedule a meeting. And then last but not least, our office hours. We're still continuing with our preschool promise office hours on the second Tuesday of the month. There's 2 sessions, one at 10 o'clock and one at 1 p.m. And that's just for you to go ahead and join. The links are on that preschool promise dashboard. So that's another way for you to go ahead and get connected with us. But like I said, don't wait for a meeting or the office hours. If you have a question you need to meet, just go ahead and send us an email. We'll go ahead and get that scheduled for you all. Alrighty. Well, we're ending right on time, 4 o'clock. So thank you for all. Thank you for joining us and for all the hard work that you do. Appreciate it. Thank you.